It is a Tuesday in about the year 1300 in a village in the English Midlands, and a man named Walter is already awake because the light is. There is no clock anywhere within 20 miles. There is a church bell, a rooster, and the fact that in June it gets light at 4:30. You have been told this man was poor. He was, but poor is a word that has to be measured against something, and almost everything you have heard about how he lived comes from films that needed him to look filthy so the night would look clean. So let's do it properly. Not adjectives, numbers. What Walter earned, what things cost him, what he could and could not buy, and where his money actually went. By the end, you will know whether you would have been better off than him, and the answer is not the one you expect. Start with the wage, because it is the number everything else hangs from. In harvest work, a man like Walter is paid about 3 pence a day, not 3 pence an hour, 3 pence for a day that runs from first light to the point where you cannot see your own hands. The Reeve says it the same way every year. 3 pence, and bring your own sickle. A penny in 1300 is a small silver coin, and there are 12 of them in a shilling, and 20 shillings in a pound. Walter has never held a pound. Almost nobody in his village has ever held a pound. It is a unit for accountants and lords, the way most of us have never held a bar of gold. 3 pence a day sounds like nothing until you ask what 3 pence buys. A hen costs about 1.50 pennies, so 2 days of harvest work buys 4 hens. Try that with a modern day's wages and a supermarket chicken, and you will find the medieval man is not doing badly on poultry. A gallon of ale. And this matters because everyone drank ale, including children, since the water was a lottery. Costs about 3 farthings. A farthing is a quarter of a penny, so a day's work buys 4 gallons of it. Ale here is not a night out. It is closer to the kettle in your kitchen. Always on, used by everyone, including the children. Now the big one. A cow costs somewhere around 10 shillings. That is 120 pence. At 3 pence a day, that is 40 days of harvest wages, and harvest work is not available in February. In practice, a cow is 2 or 3 years of everything a family can spare. So here is the shape of his economy already. Small things are cheap in his money. Large things are almost unreachable. That is the exact opposite of yours. A chicken costs you an hour. A car costs you a year. And that flip explains almost every decision he makes. But Walter does not actually live on wages. That is the first thing the films get wrong. Wage work is his side income. His main business is 30 acres of land, and the deal on that land is the reason his life is complicated. He does not own it. The lord of the manor owns it, and Walter holds it, which is not the same thing, and is not quite tenancy either. He can pass it to his son. He cannot sell it. He cannot leave the village without permission. And he pays for it not mainly in coin, but in days. 2 or 3 days a week, Walter works the lord's fields instead of his own. That is the rent. You owe the manor 2 days, says the steward, and there is no arguing because the roll says so. On top of that come boon days at harvest, when the whole village turns out on the lord's land at exactly the moment their own crop needs cutting. The timing is not an accident. Put a number on that, and it stops being medieval color. If a third of his working week belongs to somebody else, Walter is handing over roughly 30% of his labor before he has fed anyone. Call it what it is, an income tax of about 30%, paid in time rather than money. And that is only the first layer. The church takes 1/10, the tithe, off the top of what he grows, not of his profit, of the crop, 10% of the grain before he has eaten anything or set aside seed for next year. Then the small ones, and there are a lot of small ones. A fee when his daughter marries outside the manor. A fee when his son inherits the holding, usually the best beast in the byre. A fee to grind his own grain, because the lord owns the mill, and grinding at home is forbidden. That mill rule is worth stopping on, because it is the purest thing in the whole system. You are not banned from grinding your own wheat because grinding is dangerous. You are banned because the Lord owns the machine and wants the fee. Villagers were fined for owning hand querns. Some had them confiscated and set into the manor floor. The rule is one line: no man shall grind at home. Not for safety, for the fee.
Add it up, and Walter is paying something like 40 to 50% of everything he produces in labor, grain, and fees before a single meal reaches his table.
Your tax bill is probably lower. His, though, buys him no roads, no schools, and no pension.
So what does he actually eat once everyone has taken their share?
Bread, and a great deal of it. 2 pounds a day per adult, dark and heavy, the way a modern builder gets through a loaf without noticing. Pottage, which is a pot of grain and whatever vegetable exists in that month, kept going on the fire for days. Cheese, eggs, ale.
Meat is the thing the films get backwards.
He is not gnawing a turkey leg at a feast every night. But he is not vegetarian either. Bacon from the household pig, which eats scraps and forest acorns and costs almost nothing to keep. A hen past laying, whatever the ponds and hedges give up.
The result is monotonous rather than starving.
Modern estimates put a working peasant's intake somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day, because his job is essentially heavy manual labor for 14 hours. The problem was never the amount most years. It was that one bad harvest removed the margin entirely.
Clothes. He owns one set for work, and if the household is doing well,
one better set that is not for work. Cloth is expensive because it is slow. Spinning the thread for a single garment takes a woman days. That is why old clothes are inherited, patched, and listed by name in wills.
Here is the sentence that fixes the whole picture.
Walter's problem is not that food is expensive. Food is cheap in his money. His problem is that anything made is expensive, because everything made takes a person days to make, and there is no machine anywhere to help them. An iron cooking pot costs several days of wages and will be used by his grandchildren. A pair of shoes? Days. A cart with iron-shod wheels? A small fortune. So villages share them. A broken cart is a crisis, not an inconvenience. Honestly, it is closer to your car dying than to a flat tire. Now compare that with you and be honest about the direction. You spend a small share of your income on food and a large share on housing and services. He spends a large share on food and almost nothing on housing because he built his house himself out of materials from within 2 miles. His house, incidentally, is not a hovel with a mud floor and a hole in the roof, whatever the films say. It is timber-framed with wattle and daub walls, a thatch roof that a skilled thatcher maintains, a central hearth, and often a byre at one end where the animals live and quietly act as central heating. What he does not have is anything you would call savings. No bank, no interest, no safe place to put coin. Wealth is stored as animals, as grain in the loft, as a brass pot, as cloth. Every one of those can die, rot, burn, or be stolen, and each of those is a normal event, not a disaster story. Which brings the whole thing to the moment everything changes. 1348. Plague reaches England, and within about 2 years, kills something between 1/3 and 1/2 of everyone in it. Walter's village loses people the way a hand loses fingers. And then the strangest economic thing in English history happens. The land is still there. The oxen are still there. The mills, the fields, the barns, all still there. What is gone is people. And that means the one thing Walter sells has suddenly become scarce. Wages jump. Not gently. They double in places, and in some counties more. A man who took 3 pence a day for harvest work now hears offers of 5, 6, even 8 pence, and he hears them from a stranger's manor 2 villages away, which is the part that terrifies the lords. Because the deal was never really about money. It was about a man being tied to one place. Once he can walk to the next village and be paid double, no questions asked, the whole thing starts to look optional. The labor days, the mill fee, the marriage fine, all of it is a subscription he never agreed to, and now he has found the cancel button. So, in 1351, Parliament does the thing that tells you exactly how bad it was for the top. It makes high wages illegal. The Statute of Laborers freezes pay at pre-plague levels and orders every able man to work for whoever asks at the old rate. You can measure how well that worked by how often they had to pass it again. The ceiling is reissued, reworded, enforced again, for decades. The court rolls fill with fines, against men who took more and against lords who quietly paid more. A law you have to keep passing is a law nobody is obeying.
In 1381, it stops being about wages at all. A poll tax lands on everyone, rich and poor, at the same flat rate, and the countryside walks to London.
They burn the tax records first, which tells you precisely what they thought the problem was.
The revolt is crushed within weeks, and the leaders are killed.
And yet, over the next 100 years, almost everything they were angry about quietly disappears. Labor days turn into cash rent. Cash rent stops rising. The tie to the manor loosens, and then simply stops being enforced.
Not because anyone granted it, because a lord with empty fields and no men will take rent in coin from a free tenant rather than nothing at all from a bonded one who has walked away. The bargaining power moved, and the law followed the money about 50 years later, complaining the whole way.
So let's answer the question we started with. Would you rather have been Walter? Take the honest version, not the romantic one. You would eat enough in most years and badly in 1 year out of 6. You would work about 14 hours in summer and considerably fewer in winter because there is no light and no work.
Here is a number that surprises people. Because of Sundays, saints' days, and the church calendar, a peasant's year contained something like 80 to 100 non-working days. Not holiday in your sense. No beach, no pay, but days when nobody could order him into the field. And here is the number that ends the argument. Roughly a quarter to a third of children died before their 5th birthday, and a bad harvest in a bad decade could still kill adults outright. That is the real difference between his life and yours, and it is not about wages at all. So the fair summary is this. In his own money, he was not desperate. Food was cheap, drink was cheap, his house cost him labor rather than rent. In yours, he was extremely poor because everything manufactured, a pot, a shoe, a nail, cost him days that you spend in minutes. And the moment his wage finally jumped, it was not because anyone decided he deserved more. It was because half the labor force was dead, and the other half could walk. Prices, including the price of a person's day, do what supply and demand tell them to do, and they do not ask permission. One last thing about Walter, and it is the part I keep coming back to. He could not read. He never saw a map of his own country, and he probably never traveled more than 20 miles from the field he was born beside. But he knew to the farthing what his own day was worth. And in 1351, an entire parliament sat down to tell him he was wrong. So tell me in the comments, 3 pence a day, 30 acres you cannot sell, and a third of your week owed to somebody else, better or worse than the deal you are on now? And if you want the next one, it is the same question asked of a Roman legionary who was paid in salt money and complained in writing.